The Displacement Theory. Part 1. The Equation. Rajesh Kumar was, by all accounts, painfully average. Not in a self-deprecating, secretly talented protagonist kind of way, but genuinely, statistically, median on the bell curve average. His height was 5'7", the Indian male average, he checked. His marks hovered around 72%, squarely middle-class respectable. Even his face, with its regular features and mild expression, seemed designed by committee to offend absolutely no one. The only extraordinary thing about Rajesh was the monumentally stupid decision he made in the summer of 2019 to crack IIT-JEE and get into IIT Bombay. Not for engineering, not for the prestige, not even for the placement packages that made aunties swoon at wedding receptions. No, Rajesh Kumar decided to attempt one of India's most harsh entrance examinations because of Ananya Sharma, the girl next door who had ruined his life by existing. "You're insane," his best friend Pappu had declared when Rajesh announced his intention. They were sitting at their usual spot at Steel City Cafe in Displacement, drowning their post-board exam relief in cutting chai. "You got 68% in physics. You cried during the math exam. Actual tears, Rajesh." "Those were allergies," Rajesh protested weakly. "Your allergies are stress-induced, bro. The point stands." Pappu wasn't wrong. Rajesh had spent most of his academic career being spectacularly okay at everything. He played cricket decently, sang at cultural programs adequately, and had even been vice-captain of the quiz team because the actual captain needed someone who wouldn't outshine him. But Ananya Sharma? Ananya was a force of nature, wrapped in a crisp school uniform and an expression of permanent mild disapproval. They'd been neighbors in Kadma for 17 years.
Their bedroom windows were separated by exactly 15 feet, close enough for Rajesh to have conducted years of what he preferred to call admiring from afar and what the Indian Penal Code would probably call something else entirely. Ananya had topped the district in her boards. She'd represented Jharkhand at the National Science Olympiad. She'd given her IIT-JEE with the casual confidence of someone appearing for a particularly easy game of Candy Crush, and naturally, she'd gotten AR-247, IIT Bombay, computer science, thank you very much. Meanwhile, Rajesh had gotten admission to BIT Mesra, which was a perfectly respectable engineering college that his parents were thrilled about, and which felt like a consolation prize in a competition he hadn't known he was entering. The thing about living next door to someone for 17 years is that you accumulate a dangerous amount of information. Rajesh knew that Ananya studied on her terrace during summer evenings. He knew she was obsessed with murder podcasts and chocolate ice cream, but never together. She wasn't a monster. He knew she had exactly 3 friends, maintained a bullet journal with color-coded tabs, and had once threatened a senior boy with strategic social destruction for pulling a junior student's hair. He also knew, with the certainty of someone who'd been accidentally in love for the better part of a decade, that she had no idea he existed. Well, that wasn't entirely true. She knew he existed the way you know your mailman exists, a vaguely familiar presence occasionally glimpsed in passing, someone who once helped carry her mother's grocery bags and received a polite thank you that he'd mentally replayed for 3 weeks. If you wanted to talk to her, you had 17 years, Pappu pointed out, signaling for another chai. Why this elaborate nonsense now? Rajesh had asked himself the same question during many sleepless nights. The answer was complicated and ridiculous and had occurred to him the day before Ananya left from Mumbai. He'd been watering the tulsi plant, his mother's orders, not a sudden burst of horticultural enthusiasm, when he'd heard voices from the Sharma household. Ananya's mother was crying, happy tears it seemed, while her father discussed logistics. And Ananya herself had been standing in the doorway, backpack already on, looking toward the horizon with an expression of such fierce determination that Rajesh had felt it like a physical force. She was leaving, really leaving, not just Jamshedpur, but leaving behind the entire universe where proximity had been Rajesh's only advantage. In Mumbai, she'd meet actual interesting people, brilliant people, people who could discuss things beyond cricket scores and the best chaat places in Sakchi. And Rajesh had realized with the clarity of impending loss that he couldn't just let her disappear into that new world without at least trying to be part of it. Was it romantic? Debatable. Was it logical? Absolutely not. Was it the plot of several Bollywood movies that should have served as cautionary tales rather than inspiration? Definitely. But Rajesh Kumar, average in all things, discovered he had a talent for spectacularly poor decision-making when emotions were involved. "I'm taking a drop year," he announced to his horrified parents that evening. "I'm going to crack IIT-JEE." His father, a middle manager at Tata Steel, had removed his glasses to clean them. Always a sign of incoming lecture. "Rajesh, beta, you have admission to BIT Misra. Good college. Why this tension?" "I want to challenge myself, Papa," Rajesh had said, which sounded better than "I'm catastrophically in love with our neighbor and have made it everyone's problem." His mother, who possessed the supernatural intuition of mothers everywhere, had narrowed her eyes. "This is about the Sharma girl, isn't it?" "What? No, this is about my future, Ma, my dreams." She doesn't even look at you when you're standing right in front of her. This isn't about, at least aim for a realistic bowl, his mother had sighed. Maybe she has a less brilliant cousin. Part 2. The preparation. If Rajesh thought deciding to crack IIT-JEE was the hard part, the actual preparation disabused him of that notion within approximately 48 hours. He enrolled at resonance coaching classes in Bistapur, where he was immediately sorted into Batch F, and he didn't need the teacher's sympathetic expression to know that F stood for fundamentally unprepared or possibly just fucked. His classmates were 17-year-old assassins who discussed integration techniques with the passion most people reserved for discussing cricket. They'd been preparing for this since Class 8. They had color-coded notes and strategic study schedules and the kind of focused determination that suggested they'd been raised by wolves, ambitious wolves with engineering degrees. Rajesh was 19, rusty, and had spent the last year believing that mitochondria being the powerhouse of the cell was the extent of biology he'd need to know. "Focus on your strengths," advised Mr. Ghosh, his physics teacher, a man whose enthusiasm for thermodynamics bordered on concerning. "What are you good at?" Rajesh had thought about this. "I'm told I make excellent tea." Mr. Ghosh had stared at him for a long moment. "I meant academically." "Oh, then nothing particularly comes to mind." This was going to be a long year. But here's the thing about being average, you develop survival skills. Rajesh couldn't compete with the naturally brilliant students, so he didn't try. Instead, he became strategic. He identified the topics that appeared most frequently in JEE. He found patterns in previous year's papers. He made flashcards, mnemonics, silly songs about organic chemistry that would haunt him forever. Methyl, ethyl, propyl, butyl, functional groups are not that harsh was not his finest lyrical achievement, but it worked. Most importantly, he studied with the desperate focus of someone who'd made a very public declaration and couldn't afford to fail without leaving the state in shame. Papu, who'd taken admission to a local commerce college, became his unofficial support system and occasionally his voice of reason. "Have you considered," Papu said one evening, watching Rajesh struggle through a particularly demonic calculus problem, "that even if you get into IIT Bombay, and that's a big if, bro, no offense, offense taken, that Ananya might not suddenly fall in love with you. She's in computer science. You're trying for mechanical. I'm trying for civil engineering, actually, lower cutoff. My point exactly. You'll be in different departments, different buildings probably. IIT Bombay is huge. You might see her like twice a year at Mood Indigo." Rajesh had considered this many times, usually at 2 a.m. when he was too tired to lie to himself effectively. Then at least I'll see her twice a year at Mood Indigo, he said finally. That's twice more than I'm seeing her now. You're an idiot. A committed idiot. The worst kind. The months ground on. Jamshedpur's seasons changed. The harsh summer heat gave way to monsoon, then the brief pleasant autumn before winter arrived. Rajesh's world narrowed to textbooks, test series, and the coaching center's fluorescent lights. He stopped going to movies, stopped playing cricket, stopped doing anything that wasn't directly related to the three subjects that controlled his fate: physics, chemistry, and mathematics, or, as he'd come to think of them, pain, chaos, and misery. His mother worried he wasn't eating enough. His father worried he was wasting a year. Pappu worried he was having a prolonged mental breakdown. But Rajesh kept going, sustained by what was possibly the most ridiculous fuel for academic ambition in the history of education. He'd occasionally see Ananya's mother at the market, and she'd mention that Ananya was doing well in Mumbai, and Rajesh would go home and study for 6 hours straight out of pure competitive desperation. Once, during Durga Puja, Ananya came home for the holidays. Rajesh had seen her from his window, emerging from the car in jeans and a kurta, looking frustratingly identical to how he remembered. He ducked behind his curtain like a Victorian maiden, heart hammering, feeling ridiculous. Pappu had dragged him to the pandal that evening specifically so he could accidentally run into her. "This is a terrible plan," Rajesh had protested. "All your plans are terrible. At least this one gets you out of your room." They'd found her at the Dhunuchi Nach with 2 friends, laughing at something on someone's phone. She looked relaxed in a way he'd never seen her during board exam years. Confident, settled, like she'd found her tribe. "Go talk to her," Pappu had urged. "And say what? Hi, you don't remember me, but I've reorganized my entire life around the possibility of attending the same institution as you. Maybe lead with something else." In the end, Rajesh had chickened out entirely, and they'd left after Prasad. But he'd studied until 4 a.m. that night with renewed determination, because seeing Ananya happy in her new life had crystallized something. He didn't want to follow her to prove something to her. He wanted to prove something to himself, that he could be more than average, that he could achieve something difficult, that he could become someone who belonged in the same room as people like Ananya Sharma. It was still a terrible reason to put himself through this torture, but at least it was his terrible reason. Part 3. The Execution. JEE mains happened in January, and Rajesh experienced what he could only describe as an out-of-body experience lasting 3 hours. He'd prepared for this, months and months of preparation. He knew the formulas, the concepts, the tricks, but actually sitting in that examination hall with the clock ticking and his future condensing into a series of multiple-choice questions, his mind had gone spectacularly blank. For the first 15 minutes, he'd genuinely forgotten how to do basic arithmetic. Then some survival instinct had kicked in, possibly the part of his brain that remembered his mother's face when he'd announced this plan, or the thought of facing everyone after failing. And he'd started solving problems on autopilot. He'd walked out with no idea if he'd aced it or bombed it spectacularly. The results came on a Saturday. Rajesh had scored 94.2 percentile. "That's amazing," his mother had cried, hugging him. "That's terrible," Rajesh had said into her shoulder. "I need 97 plus for IIT Bombay Civil." "Beta, you've done so well." "I need to ace Advanced." JEE Advanced was the final boss, harder, weirder, designed specifically to break your spirit. Only the top 2.5 lakh from mains could attempt it, and out of those, maybe 10,000 would get IIT seats. Rajesh had 2 months to prepare for the most important exam of his life. He stopped pretending to have a normal sleep schedule. His room became a cave of textbooks and coffee cups. Pappu started leaving food outside his door like he was a studying cryptid. "You're gonna burn out," Pappu warned. "I'll rest when I'm dead, or admitted. Whichever comes first." Those might be the same thing at this rate. But something had shifted in Rajesh during that first exam. He'd discovered he was capable of more focus, more determination, more sheer bloody-mindedness than he'd ever shown in his average life. The coaching teachers noticed. Mr. Ghosh had actually smiled at him, a terrifying expression on that normally serious face. Kumar, you might actually pull this off. Is that pedagogically responsible encouragement, or are you just surprised I haven't dropped out? Can't it be both? Advanced happened in May, during a heat wave that made Jamshedpur feel like the surface of the sun had relocated to Jharkhand. This time, Rajesh walked in ready, and promptly encountered a physics problem that made him question everything. The papers were harsh, 3 hours each, 2 papers, questions that seemed designed by sadists with PhDs. Rajesh solved what he could, guessed strategically when he couldn't, and had a brief existential crisis during the break between papers. "How was it?" asked another student, looking shell-shocked. "I think I accidentally derived the theory of relativity trying to solve number 43, but I'm pretty sure that's not what they wanted," Rajesh replied. He'd walked out emotionally depleted and oddly calm. He'd given it everything, literally everything he had. Now it was up to the universe. The wait for results was its own special kind of torture. Rajesh tried to distract himself by helping his father with household projects, by hanging out with Papu, by doing anything except obsessively calculating his probable score based on answer keys. He calculated his probable score based on answer keys anyway. The estimates put him somewhere between 140, 160 marks out of 360, maybe a rank around 7,000, 8,000. IIT Bombay Civil usually went up to ranks of about 6,500 in the general category. It would be close, very close. The night before results, he couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at his ceiling fan, thinking about how much effort he'd poured into this absurd goal. A full year of his life dedicated to chasing someone who probably didn't remember his name. But also, and this felt important, a full year of discovering he was capable of more than he'd believed. His phone buzzed, a text from Papu. "Whatever happens tomorrow, proud of you, bro. You worked like a demon." Then another text, a demon who's definitely going to sleep for 3 weeks after this. "Make it 4 weeks," Rajesh typed back. Results were at 10 a.m. Rajesh woke up at 6 a.m., had 3 panic attacks, and nearly wore out his phone's refresh button. His parents were more nervous than him, which was saying something. His mother had been to the temple. His father had cleaned his glasses 7 times. At 9 a.m., they gathered around the computer in his father's study. The whole family, plus Papu, who'd shown up uninvited with samosas. "I can't look," Rajesh said. "Then I will," said Papu, reaching for the keyboard. "No, wait, I should—" "Boys, it's 10 a.m., his mother interrupted. Rajesh typed in his roll number with shaking fingers. The page loaded. AR 6247. For a moment, nobody spoke. "What's the cutoff for IIT Bombay Civil?" his father asked quietly. Rajesh knew this number in his soul. Around 6,500, but it varies by year, and this year's paper was harder, so maybe— He couldn't finish the sentence. He pulled up the predicted cutoffs based on difficulty analysis, refreshed the coaching center's websites where they'd post expected ranks for different branches. IIT Bombay Civil Engineering, expected closing rank approximately 6,300. Rajesh had made it. By 53 ranks, he'd made it. Part 4. The Reality. The thing nobody tells you about achieving your impossible goal is that you then have to deal with the consequences. Rajesh had been so focused on getting into IIT Bombay that he hadn't thought much beyond that. Now, suddenly, he had to actually go to IIT Bombay, where Ananya was, where he'd presumably have to explain why he was there, if anyone asked. "You're overthinking this," Papu said as they shopped for things Rajesh would need in Mumbai. "Just act natural." I took a drop year and cracked one of India's hardest exams to go to the same college as her. There's nothing natural about this situation. This is the opposite of natural. This is synthetic. This is polyester. Okay, that metaphor got away from you. My whole life has gotten away from me. The plan, such as it was to not have a plan. Rajesh would go to IIT Bombay, focus on his studies. He'd worked too hard to flunk out now. And if he happened to run into Ananya, well, he'd figure that out if it happened. Which sounded reasonable until he actually arrived at the campus in July for orientation. IIT Bombay was enormous, a sprawling complex of buildings and greenery overlooking the Powai Lake, filled with some of the country's brightest students. Rajesh felt immediately out of his depth, like he'd accidentally wandered onto a movie set where everyone else knew their lines. His hostel was Hostel 5. He learned that Ananya, being in her second year, was in the computer science department, with labs in the main academic complex. They were in completely different worlds, essentially, which should have been discouraging, but was actually kind of a relief. "Dude, this place is insane," said his new roommate, Aditya, a lanky guy from Delhi who'd gotten into electrical engineering. "I heard CS second years are already getting internship offers. The competition is harsh." Rajesh was unpacking his modest collection of belongings, mostly books and clothes that his mother had insisted he take. "You planning to switch to CS?" "Are you kidding? I barely made it into EE. CS is for the rankers who breathe in binary." Aditya paused. "Why? You thinking about it?" "No," Rajesh said quickly. "Just curious." Classes started, and Rajesh discovered that getting into IIT Bombay was one challenge. Staying afloat academically was another entirely. The coursework was intense. His classmates were scary smart. The professors assumed a level of background knowledge that Rajesh had to frantically Google after lectures. He spent his first month in a state of mild panic, studying until the hostel lights out, then studying more by torchlight. But here's what surprised him. He was managing. Barely, but managing. That year of intensive preparation had taught him how to learn, how to push through difficulty, how to keep going when everything seemed impossible. He wasn't top of his class, not even close, but he wasn't failing either. "You're doing better than half the batch," Aditya observed one evening, "and you're in civil, which people say is one of the tougher curricula here." "Really? It doesn't feel that way." "Bro, Ramesh from our floor already dropped out, went to some private college, couldn't take the pressure." Rajesh felt an odd surge of pride. He'd made it through the entrance, and now he was making it through the actual program. Average boy from Jamshedpur, holding his own. He still hadn't run into Ananya. IIT Bombay was big enough that you could go weeks without seeing someone unless you specifically sought them out. And Rajesh, despite his obsessive preparation to be at the same institution, found himself chickening out of actually looking for her. What would he even say? "Hi, remember me? We lived next to each other for 17 years and you never noticed me, so I went slightly insane and cracked IIT-JEE to follow you here, but in a totally normal and not creepy way?" Yeah, that would go great. Part 5. The Encounter. It happened in October, during Mood Indigo, IIT Bombay's cultural festival. Rajesh had been dragged along by Aditya and some other hostel mates to watch a band perform. The campus was packed with visitors from other colleges, alumni, curious Mumbaikers, everyone drawn by the festival's reputation. They were navigating through the crowd near the main stage when Rajesh heard a laugh he'd recognize anywhere. He turned, and there she was, Ananya Sharma, in jeans and a Moved Indigo volunteer t-shirt, talking animatedly with a group of friends. She looked different. Her hair was shorter, she was wearing actual casual clothes instead of the formal outfits he'd always seen her in back home, and she was laughing in a way that transformed her entire face. She looked happy, really, genuinely happy. "Earth to Rajesh?" Aditya was waving a hand in front of his face. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I know her," Rajesh managed. "Who? The girl in the volunteer shirt? How?" We're from the same neighborhood, in Jamshedpur. Aditya's eyes widened with understanding. Rajesh had mentioned in vague terms that he knew someone from home who'd been to IIT Bombay before him. Dude, is that the girl? The reason you— Shut up, Rajesh hissed. You have to talk to her. I don't have to do anything except stand here and have this panic attack. But fate, or possibly just the chaotic flow of festival crowds, had other plans. Someone pushed past, causing a domino effect, and Rajesh stumbled directly into Ananya's group. Sorry, he muttered, trying to right himself, and found himself face to face with Ananya. She blinked at him. For a moment there was no recognition, and Rajesh felt his heart sink. Then, wait, Rajesh? Rajesh Kumar. She remembered his name. Ananya Sharma knew his name. Hi, he said, intelligently. Yes, that's me. What are you doing here? She looked genuinely surprised. I thought you went to BIT Mesra. I took a drop year, got into civil engineering here, first year. Her eyebrows rose.
You got into IIT Bombay? That's fantastic. Congratulations. Thanks, he managed. How's CS going? Intense, but good, really good actually. She smiled, and Rajesh felt his heart do something complicated in his chest. I can't believe you're here. Small world. Absolutely minuscule, Rajesh agreed. One of Ananya's friends tugged her sleeve. Anu, we need to go check on the sound setup. Right, sorry. She turned back to Rajesh. We should catch up properly sometime. Are you on the campus Facebook groups? Yes? Great, I'll find you there. It's really good to see a familiar face from home. And then she was gone, swept away by her friends and festival responsibilities. Rajesh stood frozen in place. Dude, Aditya said, appearing at his elbow. Dude! I know. She remembered you. I know. She wants to catch up. I know. So why do you look like someone just informed you of your own funeral? Rajesh slumped against a nearby wall. Because I worked for a year to get here, and she's happy to see me the same way you'd be happy to see anyone from your hometown. Like I'm familiar, safe, background noise. Or, Aditya countered, she's genuinely happy to see someone from home, and you're overthinking this because you've built this into some huge romantic quest when maybe it's just simpler than that. Nothing about this is simple. It could be, if you let it be. Part 6. The Friendship. Ananya did find him on Facebook. She sent a friend request and a message. Hey, wanna grab coffee this week? Would love to hear how you ended up at IITB. Rajesh stared at the message for 20 minutes before responding. Sure, that would be great. They met at the campus cafe on a Thursday evening.
Rajesh arrived 15 minutes early, had a minor crisis, almost left twice, and was saved only by Ananya showing up exactly on time. Sorry, I'm late, she said, despite being exactly punctual. Lab ran over. No problem, I just got here too, Rajesh lied. They ordered coffee. She got a cold coffee. He got tea because he was too nervous for caffeine, and settled at a corner table. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Ananya laughed. This is weird, right? We lived next to each other for years, barely talked, and now we're having coffee at IIT. Extremely weird, Rajesh agreed, relaxing slightly. I think we had maybe 3 conversations total. 4 if you count the time you helped my mom with the grocery bags. You remember that? I remember you were very earnest about it, like carrying groceries was a sacred duty. She grinned. So tell me, how did you end up here? I really thought you were set on BIT. This was the moment. Rajesh could tell her the truth, the whole ridiculous, embarrassing truth. Or he could tell a version of the truth that didn't make him sound like he'd stalked her across state lines via entrance exam. I realized I wanted to push myself more, he said carefully. After boards, I felt like I'd just coasted, never really tried my hardest, and I thought, why not take a shot at something difficult? It wasn't the full truth, but it wasn't exactly a lie either. Ananya nodded slowly. That's really brave. Most people wouldn't risk a drop here.
Most people are smarter than me. Or less determined. She stirred her coffee. First year treating you okay? It's harsh, Rajesh admitted, but manageable. I'm not top of the class or anything, but I'm surviving. Surviving is good. First year is supposed to be harsh. It gets better. Well, different kinds of harsh. They talked for an hour. About classes, hostel life, Jamshedpur gossip that Ananya was hungry for, Mumbai's chaos versus Jamshedpur's familiarity. It was easy, easier than Rajesh had imagined. Without the weight of his unspoken feelings making every word significant, Ananya was just nice, funny even. She did a devastating impression of their old chemistry teacher that made Rajesh actually snort tea. "We should do this again," Ananya said as they walked back toward their respective hostels. "It's nice to talk to someone from home, someone who gets it." "Yeah," Rajesh agreed. "Definitely." And they did. It became a thing. Coffee every couple of weeks, sometimes with other friends from Jamshedpur who'd ended up in Mumbai colleges, sometimes just the two of them. Rajesh learned that Ananya was struggling with a particularly harsh algorithms course, that she was thinking about specializing in AI/ML, that she was terrified about placements, even though she was easily one of the top students in her year. In return, he told her about adapting to Mumbai, about his struggles with engineering drawing, a subject he'd somehow underestimated, about his roommates' increasingly elaborate pranks. They became friends, actual friends. And somewhere in the middle of third year, Ananya's fourth year, as she was preparing for placements, Rajesh realized something. He wasn't in love with Ananya anymore. He liked her, genuinely liked her as a person, as a friend. But that obsessive, all-consuming feeling that had driven him to crack IIT-JEE, it had faded, replaced by something calmer, more real. Maybe because he'd gotten to know the actual Ananya, not the idealized version he'd constructed from 17 years of distant observation. Maybe because he'd grown up, developed his own identity beyond average boy pining for brilliant girl. Maybe because he'd achieved something for himself, and that achievement had given him confidence he'd never had before. "You look thoughtful," Ananya observed. They were studying together at the library, her for placement interviews, him for his mid-semester exams. "Just thinking about how strange life is." "Philosophical, Rajesh. What brought this on?" He considered telling her the truth, the whole absurd story of why he'd really come to IIT Bombay. "I never thought I'd make it here," he said instead. "And now it feels normal, like this is just my life." Ananya smiled. "You worked really hard. You earned being here." She paused. "Can I tell you something embarrassing?" "Please." "When you told me you'd gotten into IIT Bombay, I Facebook stalked you, wanted to see what you'd been up to." She looked slightly sheepish. "I found your blog post about your drop year." Rajesh's blood ran cold. He'd written exactly one blog post during his preparation, at 2 a.m. during a particularly low moment. It had been melodramatic and possibly mentioned something about proving himself worthy, which in retrospect was mortifying. "Oh, God." "It was really honest," Ananya said, "and kind of inspiring. You talked about being average, about how you'd never been special at anything, but you were going to try anyway." She looked at him directly. "I really respected that." "You did?" "Rajesh, do you know how many people at IIT spent their whole lives being told they're brilliant? Everything coming easy." She gestured around at the library full of students. "It's actually really hard for a lot of us when something doesn't come easy. We don't have practice at struggling." "Are you saying my lifelong mediocrity was actually an advantage?" "I'm saying that learning how to work hard, how to keep going when you're not naturally good at something, that's a skill, an important one." She grinned. "Plus, you make terrible jokes when you're stressed, which as comic relief goes, is pretty valuable. My jokes are excellent. Your jokes are terrible. But they're terrible in an endearing way." They went back to studying, but Rajesh felt something settle in his chest. He'd come here for the wrong reasons, maybe, but he'd stayed for the right ones. He'd become someone he was actually proud of, not because he'd won the girl, he hadn't, but because he'd proven to himself that he was capable of more than he'd believed. Part 7. The Conclusion.
Ananya got placed at Google. The celebration was enormous. Her friends, her department, everyone who'd known how hard she'd worked. Rajesh bought her a congratulations card and a copy of a book she'd mentioned wanting to read. "Thank you," she said, hugging him, "for being my friend, for being someone I could talk to without feeling like I had to be impressive all the time." "You don't have to be impressive," Rajesh said. "You just are." "That's actually the problem sometimes," she laughed. "But you never treated me like I was this untouchable genius. Just Ananya." Fourth year came for Rajesh. Ananya graduated and moved to Bangalore for Google. They kept in touch, messages, occasional video calls when she wanted to rant about corporate life and he wanted to complain about his final year project. Papu came to visit during Mood Indigo of Rajesh's fourth year. They sat on the hostel roof, overlooking the campus that had been Rajesh's home for 4 years. "So," Papu said, "was it worth it?" "The most insane academic decision of my life?" "That one, yes." Rajesh thought about it, about the year of preparation, the 4 years of challenging coursework, the person he'd become. "Yeah," he said finally. "Not for the reasons I thought, but yeah." "Did you ever tell her? The real reason you came here?" "No." "Why not?" "Because it stopped being about her," Rajesh said. "It became about me, about proving I could do something hard, and telling her would make it about her again." Papu nodded slowly. "That's surprisingly mature of you. I have my moments. Very, very rare moments." "Shut up." Rajesh graduated with decent grades and a placement at an infrastructure company. Not Google or Microsoft, he wasn't that guy. But a good job, respectable, something his parents were proud of. At graduation, his mother cried. His father clasped his shoulder with the kind of emotion that fathers express through firm gripping. "You did it, Beta," his mother said. "You really did it." "I really did," Rajesh agreed. On the flight back to Jamshedpur after graduation, Rajesh opened his laptop and started writing. Not a blog post this time, but just for himself. A record of the ridiculous journey he'd taken. "4 years ago, I made one of the stupidest decisions of my life," he typed. "I decided to crack IIT-JEE for a girl who barely knew I existed." He paused, then continued. "I didn't win her heart. I didn't become some brilliant success story that ends with a romantic confession. But I did become someone different, someone less afraid of failing, someone who'd learned that average is only a starting point, not a destination. I came to IIT Bombay for the wrong reasons, but I left it as the right person. And maybe that's the best kind of love story, the one where you fall in love with the person you're becoming." The plane hit some turbulence. Rajesh saved the document, closed his laptop, and looked out the window at the clouds. Somewhere in Bangalore, Ananya was probably debugging code or complaining about meetings. They'd stay friends, probably. Meet up at Jamshedpur during Durga Puja, have coffee, share the kind of easy companionship that came from shared history. And somewhere in the future, Rajesh would tell this story at parties, about how he'd chased a girl to one of India's best institutes and ended up finding himself instead. People would laugh. Call it romantic or ridiculous or both. And Rajesh would agree with all of them, because it was all of those things. But mostly, it was his stupid decision, his hard work, his transformation from average boy to someone who'd achieved something extraordinary. And that, he thought, was better than any romance novel ending. Though he still made terrible jokes when he was stressed, some things never changed. Epilogue. 5 years later, at a Jamshedpur college reunion that someone had organized with more enthusiasm than sense, Rajesh ran into Ananya again. She'd quit Google to start her own AI company. He'd gotten a promotion and was working on a major highway project in Jharkhand. "Remember when we used to study together at IIT?" Ananya asked, nursing a drink at the decidedly unfancy venue someone had rented. "I remember you explaining algorithms to me like I was 5 years old." "You understood them better when I explained them like you were 5 years old." "Fair point." "Can I tell you something?" Ananya said. "I knew." "Knew what?" "Why you really came to IIT Bombay." Rajesh's brain short-circuited.
You what? Rajesh, you took a drop year right after I left for IIT. You got into civil, which everyone knows has a lower cutoff. You specifically chose IIT Bombay over other IITs that might have been easier to get into. She smiled. I'm not an idiot. When did you figure it out? Honestly, pretty early on. But then I realized you were never going to actually do anything about it. And you were genuinely working hard and becoming a good friend, so I just let it be. Rajesh didn't know whether to be mortified or relieved. I'm sorry if it was weird. It was weird, Ananya agreed, but also kind of sweet and ultimately harmless, since you turned out to be an actual friend rather than a creepy stalker. I wasn't stalking. You literally followed me to another state, Rajesh. Via legitimate academic channels. She laughed. Look, I'm glad you came to IIT. You became a really good friend, and you clearly needed that push to challenge yourself. She paused. But just for the record, if you'd actually talked to me back in Jamshedpur, properly talked to me, I would have encouraged you to aim high anyway. You didn't need to be in love with me to deserve good things. I know that now. Good. She raised her glass. To stupid decisions that work out anyway. Rajesh clinked his glass against hers. To stupid decisions that work out anyway. And if, years later, they ended up together anyway, well, that's another story entirely. But probably not. Because this isn't that kind of romance. This is the kind where the boy gets the life he didn't know he wanted, and the girl gets the friendship she didn't know she needed, and everyone ends up better than they started, which is its own kind of happy ending. The end.